Welcome to PR Done and Dunner. I am your host, Bob Geller. We're here to discuss a topic that is near and dear to our audience, that is tech marketing and how to break free from the competition or carve out a new space. And with us, we have a great guest. He's a veteran of Silicon Valley and tech marketing. He just came out with a new book on the topic. The guest has worked with some of the biggest names in marketing on the vendor side and at a VC firm. The big tech and Valley companies and personalities, names that'll jump out: Marketo, C3 AI, Oracle, Apple, Siebel, etc. Bruce has helped to achieve some great successes along the way. He is now founder and CEO at Traction Gap Partners. With that, let me welcome Bruce Cleveland to the podcast. How are you, Bruce?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks a lot, Bob, for having me on.
Thanks for joining. It's great to have you on the pod. And I received your book. I read it. I greatly enjoyed it.
Oh, great.
But we know it's not your first book, so maybe you can explain to your audience. I believe the first one was Traction Gap Marketing, or Traversing the Traction Gap.
Yeah, it was called Traversing the Traction Gap. That's a book I wrote, published in 2019 when I was a general partner in a venture capital firm. I wrote it specifically because it was a new firm that put together with a couple of the guys, and the one of the operating partners in the new firm is a guy that you may have heard of. His name's Jeffrey Moore,
Of
and
course.
has written multiple books. He's an icon in Silicon Valley, and
He
maybe even
wrote a nice testimonial.
yeah, he
For you.
did. Yeah,
Beautiful.
I guess I didn't screw up too badly working with him. So anyway, the point there was when we created this new venture capital firm called Wildcat Venture Partners, the I brought with me from my former venture firm called Interwest Partners a bunch of ideas that I had formed doing very early stage investing, which was really no product typically, very little, maybe a founder, a couple of founders, and what I really thought of as true venture capital. Most of venture capital today is early stage banking, at least not always entirely, but a lot of times they want to see a lot of traction, right? And so
Right.
these were the words that were being bandied about, and I had invested in a bunch of different companies that were just basically ideas. You couldn't use a spreadsheet to analyze the companies. You got a PowerPoint and a dream. So how do you make those investments and survive the unfortunate problem of survivability rates being, roughly around 10 to 15%. And those
That's
are the
it.
very best
Wow.
VC-backed startups. The non-VC backed startups, I'm afraid it's even worse. But I had been pretty successful with it. Invested in an idea that became a company called Marketo, another one called Doximity. Workday was a little further along, and a bunch of others. But the point was, I came up with my own proxies. I had been an operating executive, engineering and product marketing, product management at Apple and Oracle and some others, and I developed my own sense of what's required to be successful. And I also began to be disappointed with the venture community because I didn't feel that we were being very honest with most of the entrepreneurs that we work with. We would listen to politely and maybe not, sometimes not so politely. But in the end, we'd shake hands and say, we're not ready for you yet. Why don't you circle back in 6 months and tell us how you've done? In the meantime, I know we all knew that the team was running out of capital. They weren't getting any success, and I just felt it was disingenuous to not let them know specifically what the key issues were around product issues or market issues or whatever. And so I tried to write a tell-all book, not as a tell-all book, but as a prescriptive guide that says, hey, teams, when you come present to VCs, here's what they're thinking when you're speaking. Here's the way that you need to present your concepts. And so that was one of the things. I wanted people to get a roadmap for how to actually engineer their discussions with venture capitalists, but even more importantly, how to engineer their companies. Not just product, but go to market and a variety of other things. So I wrote this book because I developed these proxies, and because Jeff said, my buddy Jeff said, you have to write a book about this because it's too good to just keep for yourself. So I decided I would write a marketing device for Wildcat Venture Partners that differentiated our venture firm from other venture firms because all of us had money to invest. We had partners, we had limited partners, and we had
Sure,
all the
sure,
trappings, right? So
sure,
how do you
sure, sure.
differentiate yourself when it's just money? And you don't have a brand. You don't have Sequoia as the brand, or Andreessen Horowitz, or Kleiner Perkins, or Excel. So I said, okay, well, we're a startup. We're a startup VC. So I decided to write this book as a prescriptive guide for entrepreneurs of how to go from ideation to scale. And it had a framework. Go to product, what do you do in that phase? Go to market, what do you do in that phase? And go to scale, what do you do? And girding that entire continuum are product, revenue, team, and systems. And so the chapters are basically written in a chronological way, although I would argue that nothing about building a startup is necessarily chronologically oriented, but that's the way that the framework worked. And so I wrote this book, and in it, I define these value inflection points that companies need to reach. A minimum viable category. That is, have you created a new category to operate within? And we'll talk, I think, a little bit later about my buddy Christopher Lochhead and Play Bigger. Great book. He's written some other ones, he and his team. But category design is just one of the elements. And so I went on to describe these value inflection points: minimum viable repeatability, minimum viable traction. There's only 3 or 4 of them. It's not a Michael Porter competitive intelligence Harvard Business School tome. So it was closer to who moved the cheese than it was to an HBS grad school book. But the point was, I wanted something that was prescriptive that people could read, and it took off. I lectured at Stanford and Columbia, and
Oh,
a bunch of really great schools. They adopted it as kind of an alternative reading list book. I've been invited now over and over again to come talk about it. So that was the original book that described the roadmap from ideation to scale. But in it, I introduced a term that I had come up with called market engineering. And the reason that I came up with that was that I realized early on that most companies think that it's great product engineering. Build it and they will come. That will make you a success. And that is true if you're building a new drug potentially that is going to cure cancer of some sort. But it's not true for most of the products. 99% of all products, unfortunately, just building a great product is table stakes. What I realized working in great companies as a product engineering and corporate exec, Apple and Oracle and others, is that you actually have to engineer a market. And that market engineering has 5 components or 5 tenets. That's what I talk about. The first is category design or redesign. The second is this thing called positioning, then messaging, storytelling. And if you do all that really well, you inure thought leadership to the spokespeople from the company and the company itself, and then people want to associate with you. So anyway, I introduced that concept, but I didn't really pay it off in the first book. So I always knew that there was going to be a second book in store for me. I left venture capital at the end of 2019 to rejoin Tom Siebel. I had been a chief product officer and a chief marketing officer and other things for him at Siebel Systems. But he has a new company, or now it's not so new, but it was a new company, and he wanted to take it public, called C3 AI, and he asked me to be the CMO.
oh,
So to help do that, to help write the S1 and get the company along with some other fantastic execs there, help get it ready for an IPO, which we did. I decided to join. I mean, I've worked for Tom for many years. Kind of an offer you can't refuse,
sure.
and so we did. We took the company public in December 2020. I agreed to stay for another year to replace myself, build a team, etc. Anyway, so that kind of leaving off in 2022, took a few years off to learn how to race and raced with the Ferrari amateur team, and
Oh, wow.
did pretty well doing that. But I knew that wasn't going to be the end point of my career. I wanted to do something back again in tech, and AI was taking off. And I thought, okay, well, why don't I do this? Why don't I write that next book around this concept? Why don't I pay off market engineering, really explain how it works, the recipe of integrating those 5 tenets that I talked about into so you could, as an entrepreneur or even as a product executive in a large company, because they get about nearly 60% product failures in large companies for all the same reasons of a startup, primarily. And so I wrote the book, and I decided I would create a company that would help teams execute the content from within the book. And that's one of the problems with these business books I found, is that you read them and you're left really excited at the end, and then you look and you say, well, I actually don't even know how to kind of put it to work. I don't know how to activate the things in the book. So I thought, well, I'm going to build a company that focuses on market engineering. I'll use these principles from the Traction Gap framework and from this new book that came out last week. And we're in the era of AI. So I thought, well, I was a developer a long time ago. So I'm going to write a bunch of applications that help you activate what's in the book as a new idea. So at the back of the book is a QR code. You can click on it, and it'll take you to what I call the Market Engineering Virtual Studio. And it will help you generate all the artifacts, those documents that I talk about in this book. I haven't seen anybody else do that. I'm sure probably somebody have. I'm sure people will. But I thought, you got to do something a little different. So that's what I did.
But then we're planning your obsolescence and your book. They're going to do everything with an app. I mean,
Yeah, well, I'm still better than the AI.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
I did work with a team to build a new form of AI called that uses something called neurosymbolic recursion, a fancy term that basically means it learns, it invents, it remembers, and it augments generative AI. So things like Gemini and ChatGPT. So in the app, I use both. I use Gemini, and then in different versions, Flash and Pro and whatever. And I'm sure that I'll be updating those shortly. But the my AI, which I call Finn, named it after my dog, Finn uses the market research and the general capabilities of the LLM, and then it applies reasoning from all of the strategies and tactics of my IP. So it's been trained for 2 years on all of my processes, et cetera. And so it can use the LLM to do the, kind of the easy, well, I don't know about easy, but the general lifting for market research. And then it uses its own reasoning engine to supplant it. So it's now finished its beta testing. We've had a lot of people banging against it over the last 6 months, and people can use it now with the book.
Can the audience still have at it? Is there a fee for it yet, or can they? Can they? Are you still testing? I mean, is it okay for people to check it out?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay for people to join. So the way that it works is that you sign up. You can go through you can generate a blueprint. So from it at no cost. So that gives you an idea about how it works. So what's a blueprint? Well, that's one of the artifacts that I talk about. One of the 3 or 4 artifacts in the book. The blueprint is basically your market landscape, the world that we operate in. Who are the ICPs, the ideal customer profiles that we want to talk to. What is the problem that we solve? What's the name of the category? A new name, or are we going to redefine an existing category? It helps you through that process, and it guides you. So what I realized was that if you just give somebody like ChatGPT, it assumes that you know the questions to ask.
Right.
And so I had to couple that probabilistic work with determinism. And so the application forces the guardrails of it asks you questions and you answer them, but you can get an AI assist to help you. Like, I need some market research on this. Where are competitors? How are they positioned? How are you positioned? And so you kind of got this friendly assistant, Finn, who sits alongside every question and helps you answer those. So you can generate the blueprint on your own using this application. Then if you want to go forward, there's a paywall, and so you can decide to use it or not. It's
Okay.
up to you, but it gives you an idea about how it works. And now I've had probably 20, 30 different companies use it very successfully.
I am very excited. You gave me a registration code. You were kind enough. I have to jump
Yeah.
in and kick the tires myself. Um, but I love it. A marketer, a VC who can tech. And I came from the tech world too. I was an engineer before jumping into PR marketing, but it's
Yeah.
just really impressive that you can take all this great knowledge and then put it into an AI, and make it easier for everybody, I guess, to follow the principles.
Well, that's
Um,
the game plan.
I know. Well, listen, you got to have an MVP first, or whatever we call it.
Right.
You mentioned a name. I think it was Chris Lockhead from Play Bigger, and ironically, I had Kevin Maney on just
Yeah.
recently, and he, as you, I think you know, was a co-author of that book, Play Bigger,
Right.
and
And there
now
are a
he
couple of others.
right. But I guess it's a logical question, and I was thinking about this as I was reading the book, and actually you referenced Play Bigger, but maybe the audience is curious in terms of how market engineering fits in with Play Bigger. Is it competing? Is it maybe related ideas, or they play off each other?
Yeah, well, actually Christopher and I are good friends. We were mortal enemies when he worked for some competitive
Okay.
companies to Siebel Systems. But we've become really good friends. I really appreciated his first book, Play Bigger. He's written several others, he and the team. But it is entirely complementary. So the market engineering work I do it simply builds upon those ideas. So in that book, I'll just kind of summarize if people haven't read it, which is effectively, hey, look, if you try to enter a category that already exists, you're going to get clobbered. Why? Because a category king, that's how it was expressed in his book, they own the rules of the category. So if we think about customer relationship management, CRM,
Sure.
Siebel Systems invented CRM, not Salesforce. We were the fastest growing company at the time in U.S. history, from zero to a couple billion in just a few years, building the CRM category. And when I joined, we were about 2 million in revenue, and when we sold the company to Oracle, we were around 2 billion in revenue. So today, of course, that's not nearly as impressive as Anthropic and some of these others, but for a non-SaaS enterprise software company at the time, it was the fastest growing, something like 750,000 CAGR. So I mean, pretty fast. And so anyway, the point of that is we created the CRM category. We didn't invent the name, by the way. I think Mary Coleman did when she was with Bond, a different company. So, but we conscripted it for ourselves and basically propagated the category. Mark Benioff came along in 1999, 2000, and said, hey, CRM's pretty good, but, you got to install these servers. He had a whole different compute architecture in mind, this multi-tenancy. But he was super smart about not pitching tech. He pitched different outcomes because at the time, salespeople were really not happy with Siebel. And they weren't happy because the IT organization had to make all the changes in it, anything, a field, down to the field. And so sales didn't want to be hamstrung by IT. They want to get stuff done. So Mark was pretty smart. He went to small teams inside larger companies. And even though they had adopted Siebel, the small team would use Salesforce daily. And then if management forced them to enter stuff into Siebel as a system of record, they would. So anyway, the point is that he was very smart, and so he invented a new category called Cloud CRM, which had a whole different set of rules to compete against. And it turns out Cloud CRM is a bigger, better idea. and
Yeah.
and so Siebel doesn't really exist anymore after we sold it to Oracle, and Salesforce does. And it's a much
Um,
bigger company. So there's a great example of somebody who decided not to go into and play the game against Siebel, because we crushed everybody who tried to do enterprise CRM, but we didn't crush Salesforce, and we certainly didn't crush Mark. So
wow.
so that's a good example of, and I believe when Christopher said in his book, he documented that 76% of the profits of any one particular category inure to the category king. And and they cite many examples in the book. So if you don't believe me, you can go read it. And I think it's evidence that this is true, and it's my experience as well. So what I decided to do, because it's not, there is a prescriptive process in it, but I wanted to be more prescriptive. And the issue is that you know, markets, um, they contain categories. And so to have enduring market leadership, you need to build upon your original category. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to not only initially position yourself, you have to reposition all the time. You have to message. We can talk about these different words, those tenets. But the point is that Christopher kind of laid the foundation for why category design is mission critical or redesign. So, like with Marketo, where marketing automation was a failed category, and I was a first investor in just three guys and their idea, which transformed marketing automation completely. The We decided initially not to do marketing automation as a category. Because it was a failed category. Unica, Market First, and Nuncio. There were many dead bodies lying around from marketing automation. The only one that seemed to be doing okay was Eloqua at the time. And so Marketo said, "Hey, we're gonna be like Salesforce. We're gonna have a cloud-based marketing automation system." And we decided that would be the royal we. It was actually Phil Fernandez, John Miller, and Dave Morandi, those guys decided, hey, we're gonna redefine market automation. We're just gonna stick with that instead of building a new category. And so
was it a cursed category? Market automation did not make
well, it was. There really was at the time. There really wasn't any budget for marketing. No marketing technology. Right. Very little budget for it. And so we had to create the awareness and interest in why marketers should use it. And so came up this notion of a buyer's journey where you go from first contact. And in fact, I think I remember the guys tore up their first product. It didn't really work that great. And it was about using doing keyword analysis tied into Google, which, their API would go up and down. Google at the time wasn't interested in, B2B. They were doing all consumer stuff, so primarily. And so they really couldn't support an API. So the product would go down, people would get mad. Anyway, Phil tore up the technology and they rewrote it. Took about a year to do it. But what they came out with was really good, which is, hey, on a laptop, or not a laptop, a desktop, you could spell out, or you could use diagramming to go, we're first going to contact, then we do an email here, et cetera. And so you could create a workflow for marketing. And once that happened, that kind of took off like wildfire, because before Marketo, you had to basically do it all manually. And that kind of prompted the entire MarTech space, by the way. Today, there's probably 10,000 products that sit under that MarTech umbrella, and 40 different categories: search engine optimization, sure, intent. Look at Illumiscape, and it's just pixelated. Yeah. So anyway, the point is,
Illumiscape is like that. All Illumiscapes.
Yeah, they don't always start that way, though. Bob. No. So. And that's certainly the case with marketing automation. So there's an example of a company that said, we're going to redefine the category. They didn't go into the way the category had existed. They created a new set of rules. And that's how, actually, in my new book, I try to use analogies to kind of make a point. And so to me, a great analogy for a category is World Cup's on. In fact, the U.S. plays tonight against Paraguay. So we need a stadium, right? We need a place to play the game. And so the stadium's the category. And the game, it could be different games. In this case, it's European football, soccer, and it has rules. And if you're going to play the game, you got to play by the rules. And there are teams. So if you think of rules as attributes of a category, if you think of teams as brands that play the game, and if you think of the fans in the stadium as media, customers, prospects, analysts, then you get this metaphor that says, okay, they need to know where the game is played. They need to know the rules of the game. And so market engineering is um, a playbook. So I'll change the sport to football because I don't think people here would really know much about soccer, how the playbooks work there. But if anybody had ever knows the 49ers and Bill Walsh from the 80s, he created the West Coast offense. Well, that's a playbook that's playing against and in the rule book. So the rule book, again, are the attributes. The playbook is what market engineering is about. It's taking those five tenets: category design and redesign, positioning, messaging, storytelling, and thought leadership, and weaving those in a certain way as a recipe to win. So, and that's another metaphor I use in the book, a recipe. If you go to a restaurant, if it's Denny's, there's a menu and the chef built a bunch of stuff that it's a short order cook and he's got flour, salt, and beef and whatever. That's a lot different experience than going into a 2-star Michelin restaurant. They may have, beef and salt and flour, whatever,
Big
but
difference.
it's mixed together in a slightly different way, I would say. So that's what I tried to do is use that as an analogy for people to understand what market engineering is about. And what I've learned is that there have been and there continue to be phenomenal market engineers. When I think about them, I think about Steve Jobs, and maybe I even think about today with SpaceX. I think
Gotta
about
mention that.
Elon Musk. So he changes our reality, distorts the reality that we know to a reality that could be. Now, whether or not SpaceX entirely is going to be super successful, but his vision for SpaceX, which is interplanetary, human being, people living in multiple planets, solar energy generating the energy capacity for data centers and AI. I mean, that's a pretty broad vision. I think that's what people are buying into, right? It's certainly not the losses, from the company. So
It's
my point is that we can think of brilliant market engineers. They don't describe themselves like that. The Mark Benioffs, the Steve Jobs, the Tom Siebels, the Scott McNeelys, there's a bunch of them, right? We've met them. We hear from them. So and typically what happens is that people debunk them initially. They say, oh, it's never going to work. I remember Mark had to take a lot of arrows around cloud computing. It was a joke. I mean, Larry Ellison made fun of him. I don't think anybody's making fun of him now. So you have to be willing in this market engineering work, this category design or redesign, you have to put yourself forward and be willing to take some heat from people when they don't believe in what you believe. So that's why I wrote the book to give people a spinal column, to stand up and present themselves and be willing to be a little more extroverted. You don't have to be Mark Benioff, who's quite a showman in Dreamforce and whatever, or a Larry Ellison per se, but you do need to be willing to take some heat from the people who are going to be the naysayers. And that doesn't always work well with engineers who may be more introverted and not used to being made fun of or told they're wrong, etc. So I wrote the book to sort of give people the confidence that this stuff works, and it's worked. I've used it successfully for several decades.
It not just works at that level, but also on a basic level. And we have some practitioners in the audience. I like to bring it maybe a little closer to, some of the things I deal with every day. I mean, the cornerstones are things, of course, all tech companies, maybe any company has to deal with: positioning, your market perspective, thought leadership, messaging. We all have to do those things, right? Some treat them as check off the box. Yeah, we have our messages, we have our positioning, but you instruct to do it in a very intentional way for a specific outcome, which I found was very informative. And you have lots of great how-to tips in your book to how to help these elements work together.
Yeah, I did, obviously, I did it intentionally because I wanted to show you how it's a recipe, right? Those things need to be woven together in order to generate the outcome that we're talking about, which is to emerge as an enduring market leader. So I wrote it again as a prescriptive guide as opposed to just a look at all there are plenty of examples in the book, anecdotes of different companies, consumer, business, etc., that I include there. But that usually is insufficient to really help people because in the end they go, well, great, that happened for, I'm glad that worked out for Slack. That be started as tiny spec, and they happened to find out that their communication tech that they built to talk to talk to themselves, that turned out to be the product, not the gaming thing that they were building at the time. So I'm trying, what I tried to tell people is that you have to engineer your market. You have just, and since I'm trying to appeal to a more technical audience, I combined those two words, market and engineering, together because I do the same thing with every client that I work with. We do the same process. The content is far different. I have cybersecurity companies, I have med tech companies, I have just a potpourri of different types of companies that I work with. But the process is always the same. The discrete manufacturing process of a market leader is always the same. The one thing I was very concerned about, though, Bob, was the word market engineering might lead you to believe that this is the job of the CMO. And the fact is yes, the CMO is involved, and maybe that's that old hen and the pig joke, that the hen is involved in the breakfast, but the pig is committed. Well, the pig in this case is the CEO. And so, and so only the CEO can actually manage the engineering of a market because they control the breadth of resources in the company. They control the product, they control budget, they control finance, the financial piece of this, the sales, service, support. So if you just delegate this down to the chief marketing officer, that is a huge problem. It's seldom. I haven't seen it work. The CEO has to be the chief market engineer and run this. And so, yes, the CMO has to help execute it, but the CEO can, if they delegate this down. I've had a couple of clients who decided that, well, we'll have the marketing people work with you, and I go, good luck. With that, I wish you Godspeed, but I'm not going to be involved in that train wreck. So, yeah. So, I wrote the book, and I even say that this is a book for CEOs or the product executive of a large company, because only they can really control all the dials that's necessary to perform this work, which I thought it's going to be a hurdle for me in terms of who's going to read the book. So I hope that I get this through.
Well, I mean, as they say, also with Play Bigger, it has to be a whole company strategy. It's
Yeah.
not just marketing. And I think this is the reason that Tim Negris, and I should give him a shout out for introducing us, friend and client for a long time, because he said, you guys like to try to figure out how things work. And people think of marketing, they think of creativity, the big idea, not necessarily engineering, the engineering side of it, the
Yeah.
process side of it. Now, you make the point in your book that, of course, the creativity side is important too, but there is a process that you can follow,
Right.
which makes a lot of sense.
And I used it, by the way, to get C3 AI public when we created the enterprise AI category. I know now people are all using it, but this is a good example. No one was using it in the end of 2019. We did. Tom Siebel said, I want to create a new category. So Tom is very savvy about this stuff. I want to call it enterprise AI. Hey, Cleveland, you're gonna you're gonna go do that for me. So I just took all the principles that are now in the book, and we built a new category. Now, how often do you see enterprise AI? It's all over the
Oh,
place.
it's all over the place.
Yeah.
But I guess I have two questions. One, I mean, Anthropic, I think, is more enterprise oriented than OpenAI, and it looks
Yeah.
like they're now overtaking them. This gets to the question: how do you avoid the challenge of the follower eating your lunch and not being the pioneer that has the arrows in the back?
That's a great question. This, by the way, every single company I work with, every CEO I work with, um, this is one of their key questions. It's like, well, has to be ours. Why don't we try? Don't we trade? We have to trademark the category name. We have to own this. And I went, no. Unfortunately, here's the irony. The irony is we are going to create this new category, and the irony is you are going to compel others to join you because there is no category of one. There, you have to have others jump into the pool with you.
You don't
And I
want to be
said,
that company that has no competitors. I mean, that's
yeah, I mean, so the point is that I go, yeah, congratulations, you have a new category, and congratulations, competitors are going to enter it. Your job is to keep moving the goalposts of the category, to keep moving the attributes, changing the attributes, making the category bigger, heftier, elbows out. And so initially, the attributes might be 5 things, but then you add a sixth and a seventh, and then you add a new product into it. So you, it's the old adage of you never finish painting the Golden Gate Bridge. Once you finish one end, you start over at the beginning. This is how I have to explain it to my clients, which is, okay, we're going to create this, and so far I've have 5 that have created categories that are off to the races, doing well, and now they all have competitors in their category, but we were already planning the next chess move on how are we going to expand the category. Think about it this way: Salesforce today is not just it's not just a product with a Salesforce automation product. It's got Tableau, Slack, dev tools, right? I mean, it's got a bunch of stuff that the Agent Force, right? This new agentic stuff. Um, so that's the game, I mean, it's kind of like if you step onto the NFL season, you're going to meet with you know multiple teams, and you're going to have to beat them. So and you're going to change your playbook, and you're going to change the game based upon the players. So um, that I think this works best. That's the sport analogy works for a lot of people when they think about this, because it gives them not a ton of comfort that they had to build the stadium. But the truth is, you can't build the stadium on your own by yourself. You actually have to have partners. You have to have analysts. You have to have the media. You have to have a lot of people. It's expensive to build a category by yourself. So you actually need to conscript them. We did that at Siebel. There's a conference called the DCI conference, pretty popular back in the day, back in the 90s. And so we went to them and said, hey, we want a conference around what we're doing. It wasn't called CRM then. I think Tom positioned as a sales information system, and more popularly known as Salesforce automation. They go, well, great. You guys, no problem. We'll add it to one of our conferences, but you got to go get others to come. And so we called all the competitors. We called all the people who had similar products. We said, hey, we're going to be at this conference that they started. We're competition, but you should join. So we got like 50 of them to come. They didn't know, though, that we owned the unopposed keynote address for doing this, that we got the booth in the middle of 60 by 60-foot booth against everybody else's pissant, pipe and drape booth. So we hoodwinked them, but we compelled them to do it, and we were off to the races. So Mark did something similar. I mean, he's very clever. He came and to make his company successful, he came to our event, the Siebel Annual Conference in San Francisco, and he hired actors to picket the Siebel conference with things like "Don't let Siebel steal your lunch money," and they had this cute little thing called Sassy. It was a mascot. So Mark was pretty brilliant, and he had an ice cream truck that drove in our parking lot to asking for engineers to leave Siebel and come join his cause. So sometimes you got to think outside the box. Mark is definitely an outside the box thinker. And so that's when I say, for people, that's where these creative things come, but there's still fundamentals, right? You can have the trick play as part of your playbook, but the basic fundamentals of market engineering have to be in place in order for the trick plays to work.
What do you do if you're working in a space, you have a vendor in a space, let's pick one, financial anti-crime, and there's 15 vendors and they all seem somewhat undifferentiated and they're all pitching bits, bytes, speeds, feeds, specs, and you want to stand out.
Mm.
Is there a way to, do you have to go full category? Can you go subcategory maybe, or what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think what Christopher would say, this is called languaging, which I thought was a really cool, a really cool term.
Languaging.
Yeah, invent your own language. So Steve Jobs, in the famous Apple commercial, think different.
Yes.
So languaging is forcing people to think different. And what do I mean by that? If you go in as an entrepreneur and you're trying to raise capital from a VC firm and you're one of those 15 different companies that they've already seen, and you use the same words, the same TAM, the same all the same elements, they pull out their iPhone and start scrolling and thinking about their next meeting. If you introduce a new term, something that they've never heard of before, suddenly they have to actively engage in what you're saying. So with every client that I work with, we come up with our own vernacular, our own language. For them, it's their unique way of explaining new concepts or terms. A category is a big new term, so that's yeah. You if you're going to do that, that's the first thing. You have the obligation, if you're going to introduce a category, to explain what the heck it is. So
Is
like
it a
one of my
primer, a glossary, a manifesto? What is it?
yeah, so it's basically the category would be, I'll give you a good example with one of my companies called Coginity. Well, one of the big issues this year that people are finally beginning to realize, that Gartner had a big conference on, is that you can't really develop, you can't put into production these agentic systems um, without this thing that we're calling a semantic layer. So, what is that? Well, it means that if you have 25 different systems of record, you have SAP, Snowflake, these different places that have databases, and those databases may have similar or identical names. So, gross profit or revenue in one database, in one app, may be defined and calculated differently in a different app. Well, if you're trying to run in the old days, if you run a BI report against that, yeah, a human can get involved and go, oh, actually, we have to have unified meaning. So we're going to come up with some sort of unified meaning for across the company for what revenue is, or gross profit, or gross margin. So the problem with agentic systems is that you get milliseconds in to make a decision. So if you have an agent that doesn't understand what um, a refund is, and how much to refund,
Yes.
that could be a problem because there's no human in the loop in that decision. So no one's putting those systems in place until we have this semantic layer. So we came up with the word the category of semantic intelligence for Coginity. They have a fantastic product. It works. You don't have to store everything in one place. It can have database all over, but it helps you build unified meaning. So I'll just leave it at that. So we came up with semantic intelligence and a semantic control plane. So semantic control plane is a different type of word, different type of phrase. People think of layer. Well, what's a control plane? Well, now they have an opportunity to explain what that is. I'm not going to bore the audience with all that stuff, but the point is now if I get to use new language in a meeting with a VC, they're going to go, well, what do you mean by that? What is that? How is that different than this? Now they're actively engaged with you instead of just sitting there passively listening, going, okay, I already heard this crap before. Next. So this is how you differentiate your company from others. You have to. My mom was an English professor, and so um, she taught me the meaning of words. I mean, I know I went through engineering and stuff, but she taught me that language matters. My daughter's an attorney for Google, so for their language matters.
Well, of course.
Language matters here. And so you have to, I think it's the invention of new words that describe new ideas that force people to think different. And you do that with your investor, but you also do it with the market. You do it with the people who might be interested in what you have to sell. The bigger challenge is you come up with new language, no one's using those words. So on your website, no one's going to be using your fancy new, semantic control plane. Or in one of my other companies, they weren't using a new category that's emerged called loan intelligence system, which is what we invented for them. Um, Nobody was using that. I mean, if you just had that and you populated your website with it, no LLM is going to pick it up, no search engine is going to pick it up, because guess why? No one's using those terms.
Exactly.
So you have to salt and pepper your website with terms that currently exist, and that's why we use that's why we create glossaries and FAQs. The glossaries are basically to make sure that your site is picked up through SEO, and your FAQs are to make sure your words and your site is picked up via LLMs. So you need both of those today. Otherwise you're going to be practically invisible. And if you introduce all your cool new words, no one's going to be using them. Eventually they will, but not up front.
This brings us to PR, I think, because PR is about getting that idea, that information out there however you can. And I have a related question. Many B2B tech startups can barely get attention for the news, let alone for engineering a new market. So is it Herculean, Sisyphean, Quixotic, pick another ancient name, challenging,
Those are good names there, Bob.
overwhelming for
Yeah.
the average tech CEO? Just want to say, how do I do this? Is it realistic? I'll go through this discipline process. It's going to work. What do you think?
Um, well, what I have found is not very many people are good at it, and it may be just because they don't think that this is something that they need to do necessarily, or maybe they just don't know how, which is why I wrote the book. Um, but the truth is that it does take the knock against what I'm talking about is it takes around 12 to 24 months before your category, your language, et cetera, really begins to get used and bandied about in the market, if you do it right. It doesn't cost a lot, though. So this is why I cringe when some new company raises capital and the first thing they do is they install a go-to-market team, SDRs or whatever, because now you're burning Benjamins. I mean, really, really fast. And a lot of my clients, that's why they're my clients, because they burnt through the first few million, basically trying to make outbound. You can use agents to do some of this stuff now, but you're still burning Benjamins. So. And you get like 0.001 response off your email. No one answers your phone, and you're just sitting there scratching your head. How do you emerge out of the cacophony of crap that's out there? And I argue, say, well, don't do that. All right, let's first do this upfront work, this market engineering work. Let's do a blueprint first. Then we're going to create a messaging matrix, which will have your positioning, your language, your messaging, and then the story you're going to tell, the epic story of how the world is and how great it's going to be with your thing in it. Once we get all that solidified, then we're going to propagate it. And we're going to propagate it by going on podcasts, writing thoughtful art, not AI slop, but real content with real new ideas that make people think different. You're going to get into conferences, podcasts like here. We're always looking for new content and new ideas. So if you have something that's relevant, get on a podcast where that your topic is relevant. And there's tools now that you can find who are all the podcasters and you can reach out to them. I mean, it's not that hard. You don't have to spend a lot of money, but
Come
you
on my
do
podcast. You hear, Bruce? Come on my podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So the point is that um, we have technology that lets us do this and to invest in market engineering and resist the flip side of the coin, which is demand engineering. And I have some stuff on that, but probably another book I'll write on. But the point here is invest in market engineering work, because if you do that well, people come to you. So when I was at C3 AI as the CMO, I invested very little in demand engineering. I mean, we had no SDR. I hired one person to basically to handle the inbound And why did we have so much inbound? I had about 3,500 inbounds a month on zero spend, almost zero spend. Almost all of it was spent on. Uh, Now it was Tom Siebel, and it was, so I could get him onto CNN and things that would be more difficult for other tech companies. But but Tom didn't talk about tech. Tom talked about these mega transformations that were at the time. Digital transformation was the big thing. Wrote a book about it. So my argument is to people, you don't have to write a whole book, but you could write what John Miller did and at Marketo, the definitive guide to X, Y, and Z. And those aren't long. And with the help of AI and your new language and ideas, you can produce these things quickly.
Mm.
Invest in thought leadership, and people will come to you. You'll be spending way less time, money, and you'll get way higher conversion rates. So, and what you're going to do is build an inventory of companies that are your customers. So now you're building the credibility. Acme and whoever's bought your products. Now you build an inventory of people who can be provide testimonials. They could be digital testimonials, whatever. And so suddenly you're getting heft, and then you amplify that through social media, through paid social, organic social. You create snippets of video from your customers using your product, and they talk about your product. And so yes, it takes a while for that, those first stones to cast the ripples across the pond, but this is how you do it.
It
and and
works.
and it works extraordinarily well, even in the era of AI. This works because word of mouth, me talking with you and you with me, and you saying, hey, Bruce is a good guy, and his book, you might want to read it. Well, maybe somebody listening here will go, yeah, that guy sounded like he knew what he was talking about. Or others go, that guy was an idiot, I don't want, won't read it. But the point is, this is rippling, right? This is what we do in order to engineer a market. I'm engineering a market for my own book and my own
Yep.
my own business through this process. And I gave myself 2 years to build a business. I didn't put any revenue constraints on me, although we're doing pretty well. And I didn't put any particular other constraints on me other than to create thought leadership. So that's what I recommend for teams. I've done this now either myself as the operating exec or as an investor, a venture capitalist with multiple companies that went on to become billion-dollar outcomes that started as teeny little companies. And so I know it's tried, tested, and proven as a process. So, and I don't think it changes in this era of AI. In fact, I think it's mission critical in the era of AI, because people are just tuning out because they know most of the stuff is crap. It was written by, you know, a non-human, basically just regurgitating words that were already and ideas that are already out there, because that's what LLMs do. you know, they're transformers. They don't invent. They just take stuff there, and it may seem new to you, it may be, but it's just basically a reformulation of stuff that's already out there. New stuff's coming that does it, but for now it doesn't.
Anyway, Bruce, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to cover? Any questions I had out there that maybe we didn't get a chance to get to?
Well, I would just say, look, if you want to know what this market engineering stuff is, it's really this intentional, disciplined process of designing and orchestrating. I think this is right. Orchestrating every aspect of how your company defines and enters and leads a market. It's an operating system. You said that earlier. It's an operating system. It's not for the marketer. It's for the company. So you have to use it as an operating system. And I wrote the book to be an instruction manual for you. I wrote the complement of the technology because I wanted to make it easier, because I can't work with everybody. So the last piece, and I want to restate this. This is written for the CEO. Without the CEO leading the charge of market engineering, it is I don't think it's possible for you to actually execute the things that I talk about in the book. So I hope if you're a marketer or you're a head of engineering, or you're not the CEO, have your CEO read the book. And there's actually, it's now Audible as well, so you can get it on Spotify and Apple and a few other places for where books are available audio. But I encourage you because I think it will only help you as one of the executives, as one of the team members of this, because you need the CEO bought in. And without that, I don't think this stuff works.
And now you're doing this with Traction Gap Partners. Is that right? Is that the name of the
Yeah,
company?
I created my own firm called Traction Gap Partners.
How do we find you? Is it the website of the same name or?
Yes, it's www.tractiongappartners.com,
Okay.
and all of this is here, and you can reach out to me there from there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great talking and appreciate your insight and hope we can keep in touch.
Thanks, Bob. Really appreciate
Take
it.
care. Thanks.
Yeah.